You're watching Overreaction Monday. I'm Mitchell Renz, host of the Raiders Report, and coming up here today, I'm going to tell you why Antonio Pierce is doing a shit job as a head coach. I'm going to tell you why he needs to grow a pair, and I'm going to tell you why Luke Getsy is a joke of an offensive coordinator. And if Antonio Pierce cannot see that Luke Getsy is a disgrace when it comes to calling plays, then Antonio Pierce is either literally trying to tank or just a bad head coach. There is no anywhere in between. It is simply just that. Because let's face it, the Raiders had an opportunity to beat the Kansas City Chiefs yesterday on Sunday. With the win, Andy Reid is now the winningest coach at Allegiant Stadium with 6 wins. That is a laughingstock. Not only did the Chiefs take over Allegiant Stadium, which I'm not going to point the finger at Raider Nation. I'm going to point the finger at Mark Davis. I'm going to point the finger at the Raiders. I'm going to point the finger at everybody that doesn't give a shit about trying to win right now. If we're not going to try to win games, I don't want to hear just win, baby. I don't want to hear commitment to excellence. And quite frankly, the Raiders aren't going to win games until you decide to fire Luke Getsy. So please, I don't know what we got to do, Raiders. I don't know how much louder I can get. I already lost my voice yesterday talking about how bad of a coaching display that we continuously see over and over and over again. So how about this? Hit that subscribe button if you think Luke Getsy sucks and you're pissed that he's still calling plays here for the silver and black. Pick out a random name. Pick out any name right now, and he can do a better job than Luke Getsy. We have multiple coaches on this staff that could do a better job than Getsy that have OC experience. So guess what? I came up fired up here a little bit today, and I'm going to be bringing it all day. So the first thing is this. Does Antonio Pierce need to grow a pair? Yeah, he does need to grow a pair. AP, I would say it to your face. Hell, right now, I wish that you would answer me back in my DMs. I have been nothing but respectful to Antonio Pierce my entire time covering this team. But I mean it, man to man. And I mean this. I would say this to my friend. I would say this to my family. If they're doing something that I think is just idiotic and moronic, I would tell them, Antonio Pierce needs to grow a pair. Why? When you watch him coach, AP's coaching, not trying to win games, it's almost like he coaches to cover the spread. The Raiders offense plays like that they are tanking. And if the Raiders legitimately are not trying to tank, then Antonio Pierce is a bad head coach. This team is soft. This team isn't physical. This team taking on the identity of your head coach. That's what football teams do. They take on their identity of their head coach. And when you can't pick up 1 yard, when you can't pick up the biggest situations, when you can't convert when you need to most, yeah, it's on the players. And it is a little bit of an execution thing, no doubt about it. But this team is taking on the identity of Antonio Pierce because this team doesn't have an identity right now. This is one of the softest Raiders teams I've ever seen. And Antonio Pierce needs to grow a pair because for him to sit up there and say that it's not Luke Getsy, shame on you, AP. So how about this? Get your red pens out, and I want every person that's watching this show to answer this question, and I'm going to make it the pinned comment here on today's show. Grade how AP has done this year. A, B, C, D, or F. My answer after this YouTube ad break. I'm going to judge Antonio Pierce in 2 different ways right now. If AP is actually trying to win games, I'm going to give him a D- grade because the Raiders do have 2 wins. You beat the Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson that looked like maybe the worst football team in the NFL, and somehow you pulled out a rabbit's foot, taking care of business against the Baltimore Ravens. Since then, we have lost 4 in a row. I'm going to give AP an A- grade if he's trying to tank because we do have 2 wins, but when you look at some of the coaching decisions that he's made, and believe me, I got plenty of examples coming up here on today's show. If you're trying to tank, I can't give you an A+ because we got 2 wins, but when you see how this team has played over the past 2 weeks, over the past 3 weeks, especially on the offensive side of the football, I got to give Antonio Pierce a hell of a job here because he's doing a great job. Luke Getsy's doing a great job of trying to make this team to tank. And I know I've said before, I don't want the Raiders to tank. I will never want the Raiders to tank. I don't think that you can build something great when it starts in tanking. Football, whatever the hell you want to do it, your own business, you can't tear something down to then try to rebuild it when you've already torn it down so many times that the Raiders have done it. So guess what? I do believe that the Raiders are actually trying to tank. I don't think that this team is trying to win football games. Why? Actions speak louder than words, AP. I know that you're going to sit up there on the podium. You're going to deflect. you're going to just show that your tail's between your legs. I want the AP that when he goes up to the podium inspires confidence. The Antonio Pierce that I've heard recently on the sideline that I've seen does not inspire confidence in anyone, and I do. I think the Raiders are tanking based on some of these actions here. So the first one from yesterday, not trying to score before the half. I know that the Raiders were down 14-10, and I understand that Antonio Pierce, what he had to say, I saw it, I heard it. But the Raiders, first off, called a timeout after the 2-minute warning. Does anybody else remember that? It's 2-minute warning. Chiefs walk out there onto the field, and then Antonio Pierce calls a timeout. I get that you want to see the play, but you should have talked about everything that you needed to talk about in that 2-minute warning, so then you don't have to burn a timeout. That way you have extra timeouts. When it's a minute 57, it should have been 3 timeouts to go, and you try to march down the field and put some points on the board. Instead, it's a conservative throw to Jacoby Myers. It's an Amir Abdullah run. Then it's 3rd down and 8, which Luke Getsy loves, and then it's another conservative check down throw, incomplete, 3 and out. Guess what? You know what good teams try to do? They try to win football games. Do you know what good head coaches do? They try to inspire confidence in their players, which is exactly what Andy Reid did, which is exactly what the Kansas City Chiefs do. And I know Antonio Pierce said this after the Chiefs game. We wanted to score, but more importantly, we wanted to keep the clock running. Going against a really good team in a 2-minute situation, you want to get a first down, allow them to use their timeouts, and give Patrick Mahomes at least amount of time possible. What are we freaking talking about there? You're telling me more important is to run the clock down instead of trying to score. How does that make any sense? The Raiders in the first half, actually I thought did a little bit of decent job showing them some momentum. And then, of course, the Raiders do a quick 3 and out. And then Andy Reid shows that he believes in his players. And then he goes down the field. They score at least a field goal to make it a 17-10 football game. But this happens every week where Antonio Pierce, instead of being aggressive, it's the National Football League. You're not going to win by trying not to lose. You're not going to be successful in life if you're just going to sit back and wait for shit to happen. I mean, I feel like that's rule 101 in life. If you're just going to sit back and expect things to happen, it's not going to happen. So guess what, AP? Start showing that you believe in your players, or you're going to start losing them. Quite frankly, I think you're already starting to lose a few guys, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Let's go to play calls after the Trevon Merrick interception. Phenomenal play by John Jenkins, tipping the ball on Mahomes, picked off by Merrick. Merrick gets the ball all the way down. First down and goal at the 3-yard line. Raiders are currently down at this point, I want to say 17-13. So the first play is a run up the middle with Alexander Mattison. I mean, you already knew it was coming. When Luke Getsy's in that situation, you can just see him scratching like, oh my God, I got to call a run play here. Can't wait to do it. And if the Raiders actually had some success running the football, I could maybe potentially understand these play calls. But guess what? The Raiders never had success at all running the rock. So what do they do the next time? You're going to run the ball again up the middle for no yards. And then guess what? We're going to run it up the middle again. Sure, you put in Maxx Crosby as a fullback to do something a little bit fancy, but I think by you doing that, you're already tipping your hand to Kansas City, allowing them to know what you're going to do. And then what happens? Gardner Minshew is sacked, turnover on downs, and all the momentum goes right out the window. I mean, the Raiders' offense is flat out offensive. And if Getsy's not going to have faith in Gardner Minshew, then go put Desmond Ridder in. It's not that I think Ridder's going to give you a better outcome, but that play sequence right there shows me that Luke Getsy doesn't believe in Gardner Minshew, which I don't blame him. Minshew hasn't played well, but if you're not going to believe in your guys, get me a combination of guys that you actually do believe in. Let's go to this one. This one might make me want to just rip my freaking hair out. Not targeting Brock Bowers for essentially 3/4 of a football game. Tell me how on earth is this even happening? Because the first 2 drives where the Raiders, by the way, scored a touchdown and they scored a field goal, Brock Bowers saw 3 targets, had 3 catches, had 39 yards, and had 3 first downs. It's not rocket science. When you try to put the ball in the hands of your best players, good stuff's going to happen. So then, after seeing those 3 targets, Bowers went from 12 minutes and 34 seconds in the second quarter all the way to 3 minutes and 56 seconds in the fourth quarter without a target. How the fuck is that possible, Pierce? How the fuck is that possible, Luke Getsy? I'll tell you how it's possible, because you guys have no idea what you're doing. The drives yesterday when Brock Bowers wasn't targeted was a punt, end of the half, another punt, holy shit, we got a field goal, turnover on downs, and then a fumble. Every drive that Brock Bowers saw a target in yesterday's game resulted in a score for the Raiders. Touchdown, field goal, and another touchdown. When you incorporate your best players, good things usually happen. And I don't know what else we got to do to show Antonio Pierce that Luke Getsy is just so blind at being able to call plays outside of that first drive. It's just so freaking frustrating, man. Coming up here, I know that players know that Luke Getsy sucks. And I got some more reasons here why I do think that the Raiders are tanking, because Antonio Pierce has shown me, based on his actions, that he is tanking for this season. I don't care what AP has to say anymore. Actions speak louder than words, and AP has told me through his actions that he's tanking. Now, I know that right now going to watch a Raiders game sounds like a little bit of a far-fetched idea. Man, believe me when I tell you this, I totally get you. Luckily, if you're a Dodgers fan, the World Series is right around the corner here, literally right now. I want you to download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code CHATSPORTS. That's CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Not only, and I get it, Raiders football games are a little bit difficult, but there's also a lot of really cool events that you can do with comedy events, some theater events, some of the popular events going on in Las Vegas over the next, few months. Adele concert. Chug's got his tickets to Adele through Game Time. I know the Raiders game against the Broncos is down here. Their next home game isn't until November 24th. There's always so much to do in Las Vegas, and because there's always so much to do, you can wait until the last minute. You can assure that you're going to get a good deal, and that's why I love Game Time. I also love the Game Time picks, which make it easier and faster for you to be able to find the best prices available. So if you go and try to get some Raiders tickets right now, you'll look at the Raiders-Broncos game. You can see all your seats here in the bowl. But then when you go to the Game Time, right now you can get one for, I think that says, $389? And I guarantee you this, the closer and closer that the event gets, the lower and lower some of these prices are going to go. And I get it that it's really difficult right now to go watch the Raiders. But you know what? When you go to a Raiders game, when you go out there, and if you're going to enjoy that entire weekend, make sure you do some other things as well that put a smile on your face, and Game Time's going to help you do that. Lowest price guaranteed. Prices drop the closer that the event gets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CHATSPORTS. If you're looking for the link, it's going to be available to you down in the comments and in the description of today's show. Let's go to why I believe AP is either a bad head coach or the Raiders are tanking. Or, in this case, it's both. It's the same offense every single week. I don't really understand how you can do something over and over and over again and expect a different result. The Raiders points by quarter. I mean, it's the same song and dance. It's Luke Getsy has shown you this season, and even back, you can ask Bears fans, has shown you the ability to draw up good plays on that very, very first drive, and then in the first quarter, do a decent job. In the second or third quarter, Luke Getsy has absolutely no idea what he's doing. And I see down here in the fourth quarter, a lot of those points are essentially from more of like a garbage point standpoint. Realistically, teams figure out Getsy, and he's not good enough to be able to go out there and make corrections. And, I always say this on the show, and I know this is a very, popular quote that's always been thrown out there, but insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I don't know how us as Raider fans are expecting a different result about this Raiders offense if Luke Getsy's still going to be the OC. I don't know how Antonio Pierce is going to expect different results if he's still going to allow Luke Getsy to continue to call plays. But you know what? When Raiders players, and I'm not saying that Maxx Crosby is calling out Luke Getsy. I'm not saying that he's calling out Antonio Pierce. What I am saying, though, it is very obvious that there are certain guys right now, I think, showing a little bit of frustration. And Maxx is always going to be one of those dudes that he's not going to go anywhere. If you didn't see, I made how many videos about Maxx Crosby never wanting to be traded. Mark Davis literally emailed ESPN and said it's not going to happen. But when Maxx starts saying things like this, it's been the story of our season. We can't keep doing the same thing. We've got to find ways to win. And I agree. The problem is you don't have a coaching staff that can help you find ways to win. Whatever they draw up during the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, is the game plan that they stick with. And what Andy Reid is so good at is going, okay, if you're going to do this, we're then going to be able to make the proper corrections, and we're going to be able to beat you this way. the Raiders, and I wanted AP to work. I really did. I never wanted Luke Getsy. But the problem right now that AP is showing you is when big-time situations happen, he folds like a lawn chair. And that's the best way that I can possibly put it. The last thing and why I believe the Raiders are trying to tank is AP blamed the players yesterday for execution. He did say that we all need to be better, which it's true. AP needs to be better. Luke Getsy needs to be better. This Raiders offensive line is one of the worst offensive lines I've seen this unit have in quite some time. With the amount of false starts that they had in really big situations, JPJ struggled. DJ Glaze looked like a rookie. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of parts of this game where execution comes down to it. But I don't get it how we can see it. I know players see it. I know the media sees it. Beat reporters see it. And when they ask Antonio Pierce about taking play calls away from Getsy, he says this: as a team overall, we've got to get better. I'm not going to get into the play calling or anything of that nature. Right now, what I'm seeing, the Antonio Pierce behavior, it's reminding me a lot right now of the way that Josh McDaniels acted last season, where when you asked him a question about coaching, you could instantly see he put up a wall and he'd get super defensive. Usually people act like that when they're not man enough to take blame, but they know it's probably on them. And if AP was a execution problem, right? And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of execution plays, but it's 20-13 in the fourth quarter. And realistically, this is probably the biggest drive of the game. How is this an execution problem? The Raiders decided, and if you don't believe me, when I went back and I watched the film this morning, I almost couldn't freaking believe it. Quite frankly, I don't know how I missed it when I was watching the game live, but that's why you need to go back and watch the film. The Raiders lined up Thayer Munford as an outside wide receiver. The same play, and this was, I want to say, like 2nd down and 7. They lined up Munford, not like in the slot, not as a tight end where maybe he could potentially block. They lined up Thayer Munford out wide on the outside where you would put an X or a Y receiver. Gardner Minshew calls hike. This might surprise you because Thayer Munford, an offensive tackle, is lined up at receiver. Minshew struggled to find anyone open, so he tucks it, he runs, and he fumbles. I'm a believer when you put good energy out into the world, good things happen. When you put bad energy out in the world, bad things happen. When you do stupid shit like lining up Thayer Munford as an outside wide receiver to a quarterback when you're down by 7 with a QB in a game that's been struggling its entire season, and he can't find anyone open and he's forced to tuck it and run and he fumbles, I know that's on Minshew for turning the ball over, but that's on AP. That's on Luke Getsy. How is that play even just going? Like, if Luke Getsy's going to call the play, cool. Like, we've already seen it this year. Luke Getsy's going to call plays that nobody thinks make any sense. But if you're Antonio Pierce, your head coach, you see that, you go, what the hell are we doing right now? Call timeout and let's re-talk about it. Let's figure out something. It's just time and time again, this coaching staff shows that they just have no idea what's going on. And this is going to be a really bad football team this year, quite frankly. I don't know if they're going to win another game because if AP can't make adjustments and if Luke Getsy's calling plays, I legitimately think this team's going to go 2-15, which is just super sad to say. Final thing that we're going to talk about here on Overreaction Monday, there are Raiders players. I am telling you this. People called me a liar last year when I said that players are starting to get out on Josh McDaniels. A week later, Josh McDaniels was fired. I have talked to a few guys. I'm not saying anybody has told me that they want AP fired. That's not the case at all. But I am telling you this. There are Raiders players that are growing tired of Luke Getsy. This is believe it, baby. It's not an overreaction at all. I know this was a story that we talked about, I'm going to say about 2 weeks ago, that I didn't really want to bring to light because I wanted to get some more information on it. And quite frankly, it's not really the time that I wanted to do it because I wanted to try to bring the Raiders a little bit closer together. But at 2-6 right now, and after AP said what he did, and after seeing Luke Getsy just continuously try to sabotage this Raiders offense, I don't really care anymore. I don't care if players get mad at me. I don't care if coaches get mad at me. I do this show for the nation, and this is a fact. Per source, the Raiders or players are starting to get tired of the offensive play calling. And I don't know if you guys saw this, but Nesta Jade Silvera last week, might have been like 10 days ago at this point, liked something on Facebook. And he liked something on Facebook about firing Luke Getsy. A few days later, the Las Vegas Raiders decide to cut Nesta Jade Silvera. They ended up promoting, I want to say, Zach Carter from the practice squad. But Nesta Jade Silvera has got a good relationship with Antonio Pierce, or else he used to. And when you start to see some players show their frustration on social media, guess what? those conversations are already happening in the locker room. There's already frustration starting to boil over in the locker room, and it's starting to spew out. But if Nesta Jade, who was one of AP's guys, AP and Nesta liked each other. I don't know how that relationship is anymore. But if some of the AP guys are starting to maybe lose faith in what this team is doing, and the Raiders are trying to get those players out of the locker room, I'm not going to sit up here and say Nesta Jade was a good player. He really wasn't that good of a football player. But I think we could all agree that we do need extra depth on the interior, that moving on from certain guys, I don't know if makes a whole lot of sense depending on where we are right now as a football team overall. But I'm telling you, there are players right now in that locker room that are starting to lose faith in what AP and what Luke Getsy are bringing to the table. And you're 2-6. You got the Bengals this week. You got a bye week to be able to figure it out. But if you don't end up figuring it out, and I think number one thing is you got to stop letting Luke Getsy call plays. If the Raiders continuously let Luke Getsy call plays, not only do I not think that they're going to win, I think that they're going to lose their locker room.